The text for today's program is taken from the second chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, and we'll begin reading again from verse 1. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered together all the chief priests and the scribes and the people, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea. For thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. When the shepherds found Jesus in the stable, he was identified in the Bible as a babe. The wise men find Mary and Jesus not in the stable, but in a house. Herod inquires about a young child, and when the wise men found him, the Bible calls him the young child. Obviously, some time has passed here. It was not the night of his birth, nor was it the next day. But how much time had passed? Is it possible to say? And is it important? It's not possible to say definitively, and it's not crucial to know the answer, but I think it is important enough to comment upon for several reasons. The role of the wise men has been relegated to bit parts in the Christmas play. For that reason, the whole story, from verse 8 to verse 23, is more or less ignored as having little significance. Actually, it's a very significant story, and the first way to underscore that significance is to separate the scene with the wise men from the night of and the events surrounding Christ's birth. Significant time has passed since the birth of Christ, when the wise men make their entrance. Assuming that these wise men were from Babylon, some say, based on Psalm 72, that they were from Tarshish, which is further away still, there are considerations to be made. Once the star appeared, and they had seen it, discussions and searches of the record and of the ancient manuscripts needed to be made to determine what it meant. There is good reason to suspect from the account that this may have taken a number of months. Once it was decided among the devout men that this was the sign of the coming of Messiah, discussions needed to be held as to who would make the journey. The word had to be gotten out, and gold and spices collected to comprise a worthy gift. Before preparations could be made for a physical journey, these men had to seek and receive the permission of their rulers to leave and go looking for the Christ. One may assume that this permission was not obtained without consultation and persuasion. And then they couldn't just pick up and go. They had to get together camels, provisions, equipment, and a traveling party. And then there was the time consumed by the journey. It has been speculated that had the children of Israel gone straight from Egypt into the promised land at Kadesh Barnea, the journey would have taken about 40 days. Babylon was much further than Egypt, and these men were not certain where they were going. If they were from Tarshish, they had to arrange for travel by ships, and only certain times of the year were commodious. But I still think they were from Babylon. Neither Alfred Edersheim, Philo, nor Josephus makes any mention of a devout community of Jews in Tarshish. though Psalm 72:10 cannot be entirely discounted on this basis. Anyway, let's not get mired in speculation. Wherever they were from, they had to reckon their course by the stars as they went, which means they were not traveling very fast. An interlude of 2 or 3 months, perhaps more, is probable for this journey. There was apparently uncertainty about how much time had passed since the star had first appeared when they were called before Herod. In verse 7, when he had privately called the wise men, he inquired diligently of them what time the star had appeared. In other words, Herod took them into private session where no one else could overhear the conversation and pressed them hard to tell him exactly what time the star had appeared. Remember that Herod the Great had killed his wife, his mother-in-law, and would yet kill his 2 sons in order to preserve his kingdom from falling back into the hands of the Jews. His reason for wanting to know the exact time comes out clearly in verse 16. Herod wanted the wise men to deliver Jesus to him, but if they did not, he had it in mind to kill all the children of Jesus' age and younger, to be sure that he eliminated this one who was born to be king of the Jews. For that tactic to succeed, Herod needed to know how old Jesus was. When he realized that they were onto his game and they had left the country by another route, he proceeded with Plan B and had all the male children in Bethlehem and in the entire region killed. The fact that he had all of them killed 2 years old and younger indicates to me that this was as close as he could come after talking to the wise men to establishing the date of Jesus' birth. Enough time had apparently passed since the star first appeared that the wise men themselves were not sure exactly how long it had been. Herod had inquired diligently, and they apparently trusted him at first because they left in a state of joy, believing that they had found an ally in their quest to find and worship the Christ child. They were evidently trying to tell him exactly when the star first appeared, and their information must have been pretty accurate. It's possible, from the language of this story, that the wise men did not follow the star to Jerusalem. It may be that the star had only appeared briefly, sometimes earlier, and that they determined the reason for it was the birth of Messiah, and that they thought, from the records, that Jerusalem was the place to start their search. This thought is occasioned by the fact that the star was not leading them in Jerusalem, and that it only appeared to them and led them to Jesus after they left Herod's debriefing session. But all of this, however it was, and the record does not spell some of it out clearly, leads me at least to the inevitable conclusion that Jesus was around 2 years old when the wise men found him in the house with Mary his mother. In verse 9, when they heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. The star had disappeared temporarily, or at least was not visible to the wise men when they reached Jerusalem. When it disappeared is not told to us. As a consequence, they had to go about asking for information as to where to find the Christ child. After they left Herod, the star reappeared and led them directly to the house where he was. Had they been able to follow the star from their point of departure directly to the house of Joseph and Mary, they would not have been making inquiries, and Herod would not have heard about it. In this, we see God's plan unfolding. It was part of the plan that Herod hear about it. As a judgment against the Jews for their derelictions of the past, a prophecy was made that was to be fulfilled, and we'll talk about that shortly on. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Here we find the fulfillments of Psalm 72, 10 and 11, and Isaiah 60, verse 6. At his incarnation, the kings of the earth come to pay homage to the King of the earth and heaven. While all Jerusalem was troubled with Herod about the idea that a king of the Jews had been born, men were coming from far places to honor him. At no time do we find the Jews, Jerusalem, and Israel honoring his birth. Those old scribes and Pharisees were Old Testament scholars. They knew more about the Messiah and what he would do in and to the nation when he came than they wanted to let on. In theory, they were looking for Messiah. In fact, they were dreading the day, and they were troubled about the possibility that that time had come. They never accepted his coming from day one, and they began immediately to resist him and John the Baptist with him. As it turns out, they liked the rule of Herod better than the rule of Christ. One has only to conclude that they knew this when they heard about his birth, and that is why they were troubled with some of the same things that troubled Herod. You will remember that from verse 3. But, like the people along the way when Jesus rode down from Bethany on the donkey, God had a witness to recognize and to honor him. Here, as there, God was going to have a witness to him if the stones had to cry out in order to make it. They were not from the religious inner circle, and they were not the ones who did all the talking about the coming of Messiah. It's possible that they were Gentiles and not Jews at all. It may have been another case of the Gentiles witnessing to his greater and eternal kingship. I do not discount or demean that possibility. However, the Gospel of Matthew, the story of the king coming to Israel, while allowing it, does not require it, as would the Gospel of Luke. These could have been Gentile children of the promise, looking for the Redeemer, or they could have been devout Hebrews, looking for the Messiah. But whatever their ethnic and national origins, they were men of honest hearts who traveled great distances with considerable difficulty to come and pay homage. The scribes, the Pharisees, the lawyers, and the Levites wouldn't even walk across the street to pay him respect. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. These holy and devout men had a communication with God, and they were warned not to go back to Herod. Herod would have killed Jesus if they had told him where Jesus was, or at least he would have tried to. Gabriel makes that clear to Joseph. But also, their own lives were in utter danger. Herod had met with them in private, and they were the only ones who could have blown the whistle on him. Herod had been desperately trying to win over the Jews, and he did not need to stand accused in the public eye of killing another Jew of royal blood, and him just a child. He would no doubt have had the wise men killed to conceal his complicity in the matter. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, "Out of Egypt have I called my son." Gabriel appears now to Joseph and warns him to take Jesus and go into Egypt. Joseph is to stay there until Gabriel appears to him and again tells him to come back. That is because Herod will leave no stone unturned in an effort to destroy Jesus, but it's also for another reason. It's to fulfill the prophecy of Hosea 11:1, "When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt." And it was to establish another all-important truth. From the day when God changed Jacob's name to Israel, and when he established the national covenant through Moses to the nation in Sinai in Exodus 34, verse 27, God had spoken of and prophetically testified to a Prince of God who would come to this earth to rule over his people and his kingdom. Now it is being shown that Christ is that prophesied Israel. He, and only he, is the true Prince of God who will rule as God in every respect. And this true Israel, whose going forth have been of old, will establish a kingdom in this earth and will call out a people for his name and for his kingdom. For reasons that please God and that were necessary for the plan of redemption to unfold, that offer was made first to the natural children and the nation. Their failure to accept either the king or the kingdom was well prophesied in advance. Even so, the offer was valid, and their rejection of the king and his kingdom brought about the introduction and the onset of a greater kingdom, not of this world, and the citizens of that eternal kingdom who were not people of the flesh, but children of the promise. Remember that there are two kingdoms developing by the incarnation of Christ the King. The eternal kingdom, which is not of this world, does not come on in dispensational posture until after their rejection of him and his kingdom, his rejection of them, and the desolating of their house. This eternal kingdom has been in this world in some form since the Garden of Eden, and more particularly identified and established in Genesis 12:3-7, according to Galatians 3:16-18 and 24-29. Matthew 2:16 is put here by specific design to establish that this Christ was and is the real eternal Prince of God, which Jacob the man and the nation were only types. As in the case of Solomon, Samson, Aaron, and so on, types had nothing to do with character or spiritual integrity. They were just that, types, prophetic witnesses, and foreshadowings of that which was coming as God worked out the plan of redemption through time and history. Inevitably, men and nations who were types failed because that was an important part of the school-teaching ministry of the law. David and his seed forfeited the kingdom by godless behavior. Moses could not go into the promised land because of disobedience, and on it went until the very failure of the nation itself. But Matthew 2:16 is here to remind us that a bigger program is being worked out and will succeed under the leadership of him who was not a child of Adam, who had no flaws, and who would establish in this earth that kingdom. Never lose sight of the fact that Christ's ministry to the nation was a temporal operation that could only end up in failure for them, according to Daniel 9, verses 25-27. The program of God from before the foundation of the world was for Christ and the church. The incarnate God did not come in this world to establish a temporal kingdom with the nation of Israel. He came to establish the eternal kingdom of God. In Isaiah 9 it is written, "For unto us a child is born, Unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David, upon his kingdom, to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. The Lord sent a word into Jacob, and it hath lighted upon Israel. If you don't know that lighting upon Israel is a prophetic reference to Christ, then your understanding of the prophetic scriptures is wanting. This is who this child that Herod was trying to kill was and is, the Israel of God.
Read more at godspointofview.com. A copy of this book is available from Amazon in Kindle and paperback format. Link in the description.